and, just look around and be like, yeah, this is nice. Let's go home.
Well, then what you're saying is it basically it comes down to their needs.
Yeah, it comes down to their needs. I mean, if you come from a bountiful land and you don't know any better than just
like with the Vikings,
the first thing that's on your mind.
With the Vikings, what decided whether they were going to attack you or try to be friends with you really depended what was going on in their own societies back home. Were they in the middle of a famine? Were they in the middle of a feast? So that was varying. I think it would have been the same thing with the Native Americans. When we arrived here, they were in constant wars with each other. They were in constant wars over territory. They had their own hierarchy of systems. They had their own hierarchy of executions.
And their own hierarchy and their own roads.
So it's kind of a 50-50. It really came down to who came to boats and the manipulation of gunpowder first.
Yeah. I agree. But,
But on the second hand, being pushed out, lied to, I would definitely agree. They deserve, what they do deserve is a little bit more ability of their reservations as being individual nations. And that gets into like sovereignty and a completely different topic.
Yeah, I know. But it is what I would want. Like if I had a choice between 40 acres and, I don't know, a plow instead of a mule, I might take the mule. I'm sorry.
40 acres and a John Deere.
Yeah, if I had 40 acres and a John Deere, it doesn't matter where that 40 acres is. I'm taking the 40 acres and the John Deere. Like, versus, we'll give you $1 million or we'll give you 40 acres and a John Deere. Does everybody else got this choice? Yes. Well, I'll take the $1 million then. I can buy a 40 acres that I want with that. But in reality, I'm probably only going, if they do give reparations, I'd probably only get $50,000. And with $50,000, it's basically the same either way. The 40 acres is probably worth $50,000 no matter where it is, because it's going to be worth something eventually. The population is not controlled here. And, the $50,000 would just go to old bills and stuff like that I owe. Knowing the government, they probably say that we're going to give you $50,000, and then before they hand it to me, they would take a chunk out of it for my school loans and taxes that I owed or whatever. So it wouldn't be tax free anyway. The entire idea of reparations is like, yeah, we're going to get a whole bunch of money, but the fact of the matter is, the government always finds a way to screw you.
Well, that was something else I was going to bring up. You're going to pay taxes on the money that's given out.
Yeah.
So it's like you're going to pay it back. Actually, your grandkids are going to pay it back.
Mm-hmm.
If you take it out of Social Security, well, you're screwing yourself down the road when you can't really take care of yourself. The more they take out of Social Security now, the less they're going to give you later. And unfortunately, Social Security is built really hard for all sorts of stuff that has nothing to do with your retirement or disability.
Yeah, and it makes no sense to most people who don't know anything about it.
And there's another good idea for a show.
To learn how to navigate it.
Is we should do a show about disability in America and how that all works.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. Well, that wouldn't be a show. That would be a series, and it would probably last another 100 years. I don't think you have that kind of time. How disability in America works makes no sense.
Well, that's kind of like, in some ways, it's funny that we're talking about reparations. In some ways, it works like reparations almost. But it's money that you've already put in.
Yeah.
And it also goes to a lot of other stuff. But let's get back to reparations. I've got a couple... I
don't think Congress should be bypassed, but then again, I also don't think that Congress actually does their jobs. Because this isn't the first time reparations has been on the docket. This is just the first time that someone has threatened to do something about it immediately instead of waiting for Congress to do something about it.
Well, and in this situation, Congress is willing to put the focus on it. So it's not like Congress is going to make them wait forever. And The Democrats are the leader of the House, and they are the majority leaders of the Senate. They don't have to wait. They can make it happen immediately. The fact that they're telling everybody it'll take so long is illusion. How long did it take them to get Trump in there and try to pull their false impeachment? They had him in there in weeks.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's kind of it. All comes down to who the lion wants to eat tonight. But what I did is I went through and I was looking for people, and I got into where they were speaking to Congress about originally. Well, actually, it's the current one, HR 40, and that's when I learned, this isn't voting on whether reparations become legal now. It's voting on a study to see, are they deserved, where the money will come from, what the money will do, what will the effect be. And the first one I got up is Sheila Jackson Lee. She is, let me go on here and take a look. My notes work slow.
No worries. I've got all the time in the world. All
right, she's a House representative, and I like her candor. I do like her balls. Her and I have the same kind of style. Stare right at it, run straight, and run true.
I am not here in anger or anguish. I am not in any way seeking to encourage hostilities. There are diverse opinions in this room, and I understand it, appreciate it, respect it, admire it, and love it. I'm a product of my history. I am clearly a child that has walked this path. No, I did not pick cotton. But I will say that those who picked cotton created the very basic wealth of this nation, for cotton was king.
Well, the thing she says is sort of true. Cotton became king. The basis of this country came from timber and fur. And timber and furniture went on a long time. Cotton wasn't king until denim became popular, and that wasn't until about 1867. But most what was happening with cotton plantations was France was buying tons and tons of cotton throughout the 1700s because they were wrapped in a war with Britain. During our own American Revolution is when Napoleon was the dictator of France. And I think he attacked the Russians. He did what all the classic dictators did. He pissed off so many people, he got his ass whooped in the end.
Because he couldn't prepare for the cold. Right.
And what's hard is the people that oppose, or I won't even say oppose reparations. A lot of times I would think that non-black people, including myself, when they start hearing about reparations and it depends on who's speaking. And it's easy for me just to close my mind and be like, oh, bullshit. Like when she's getting into screaming about how cotton is king, well, not really. Cotton became king after slavery had ended. There is one guy, Cory Booker. I like what he says. He's the only one that goes on to explain anything as far as having a reason or a source. But he gets wrapped up in how the law and the courts and the judges and the cops are all bunk. He calls it all Jim Crow. And I'll agree there's a certain point of American history where the laws definitely worked in the manner of the Jim Crow aesthetic, but not anymore. Not in the time of...
while black.
A sense of anger where we are in the United States of America, where we have not had direct conversations.
I could say that you're right, and it
of
doesn't
the
happen
inequities
anymore, but I actually...
and the pain and the hurt manifested in economic disparities, manifested in health disparities, manifested in a criminal justice system.
Italians can verify that if you meet an older
so we as a nation have not yet truly acknowledged and grappled with racism and white supremacy that has tainted this country's founding.
Any black or Hispanic person can verify that from the time that slavery ended till the war on drugs started with marijuana.
Well, I can understand that. Right. And what it is the image you put off. I'm white. In the 80s, I used to get pulled over because I had long hair. pulled out of my car because I had the leather jacket, the jeans. I had a loud exhaust system. Searched and frisked without reason. It really comes down to the vibe that you're putting out at times. And I don't think that people realize that sometimes they're putting out such a negative vibe.
Well, I won't say that that's not true. There are people out there who do put off a negative vibe. But what do you say to the man who's wearing a suit and going about his day that gets rushed to the ground? What do you say to the man who's out walking with his kids? What do you say to that poor white man that got beat up, tased, arrested, and then after they did all of that to him, while he was on the phone with 911 telling them that the cop behind me is still trying to pull me over and my wife is in labor, I have to get her to the hospital. Can you please tell him to help me get to the hospital?
I find that, well, first off, what you're doing is you're taking something very obscure and infrequently that happens. First off, when the cop came up, I'll tell you what, the guy got not what he deserved, but sort of. The cop comes up to pull him over. His wife is in labor. He should pull over and explain to the cop that his wife is in labor. The cop will either get an ambulance there immediately or help him get to the hospital faster. He refused to talk to the cop to a point that he was getting tased. I mean, it's such an obscure thing to happen. It's not something that I worry about. I am not worried about having to get to the hospital in a hurry and getting tased by a cop. Either the driver was mentally ill or the cop was mentally ill. It's an absurd situation. I mean, obviously, one side is right and one side is wrong, and whoever misinterpreted that situation definitively was either mentally ill, a brain injury, that bad. But that is not like an everyday thing. That's not like a systemic issue.
Well, see,
now New York City had passed a law about being able to frisk anybody who's walking around. And it was one of the biggest disasters.
Stop and frisk.
Right. That's where the whole issue started and came from. That was he was trying to run for president too. I can't think of his name. Oh goodness. I'll think of it in a little bit.
You talking about the governor that started the
Bloomberg. It was Mike Bloomberg. He was the mayor of New York City. And he really pushed on the stop and frisk thing. And so, all right, here you have the stop and frisk thing. And you're right. There are so many cataloged issues where the way they did it was wrong. But now you have the stop and frisk law. Cops are scared of general thugs walking around. Not of everybody, but people that they feel are thugs, whether they're judging it by body language, by lumps in the coat, by their actual record and what they actually know about them. So you left. How many officers you figure in New York City? 3,000, 10,000? You have thousands of officers that are left to their own personal ability to interpret who they're going to frisk and who they're not going to frisk. And that comes down to who scares them and who don't. Again, we're coming down to image, accountability, what you say about yourself and what you reflect.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no accountability.
Well, no, nobody has to be accountable. Parents don't have to be accountable.
Yeah, that's what really upsets me.
The kids don't have to be accountable. Grandparents aren't accountable. That is a real issue within our society. The other issue our society has, and
the blame game.
I realize it was an issue with black people for a long time, but it has also become an issue for white people and everybody else, is how we are raising our young men. The snowflake generation, Gen Z, came from the millennials. The millennial generation came from my generation. We were the tail end of a generation that had heavy-hitting parents and hugely strong disciplinarians. My generation, we raised our kids in the 90s so that, if that bothers you, we're going to cut that off. We raised 2 generations of kids that believe that they're not ever supposed to be depressed.